And you gonna murder this one and murder that one. Talking all that bullshit. I'm gonna put it to you like this, yo.
This is for the nerds, this is for the brainiacs, this what we deserve. Go ahead and play it back, you ain't gonna touch me, you not gonna do nothing, you are not above me. I bet you wish you was me, I know it, I know.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Only Friends podcast. As you can see, I am leading you guys in today because we have no Conrad, and that's a good event. One, because I don't have to have him interrupt the show, and two, because
I'll do that for you.
Right. Two, it means
Don't worry, I'll do that for you, Berk.
Nice.
Fucking idiot.
What's poppin', Berkey?
You got us over here, Burgers. You're in
He's
trouble.
made day two.
All right.
So torpedo
What's
baseball
poppin',
bats,
bro?
huh?
I can't hear anything. Anyways.
Torpedo baseball bats?
I'm a little confused by this. I'm not confused by the desire to do it. It seems very smart.
The legality of it.
I don't see where it would be illegal.
Yeah, it's gray, but I
Is it?
think it's a little gray.
It has to be 2 3/8 inches at its widest point.
Yeah,
It still covers that.
I think it's there was like I think it'll fly. Like I think it'll
I was
fly.
of the impression that people started using this bat last year. The guy who invented it is now with the Marlins, so I'm sure that they'll start to utilize it too.
They didn't need it this weekend.
They didn't. Well, they did. They played a bunch of 2-run or 1-run
They
games.
scored enough runs.
I get the ingenuity of it. It makes sense.
Yeah.
You create a bigger sweet spot. That's the goal of a bat, and it does seem silly to have.
Guap, can you pull up a picture of that bat?
You got to
So people know what we're talking about.
It does seem quite silly, the old design, to have a bunch of barrel at the end of the bat. If you hit the ball off the end of the bat, you are certain to just break the bat, as well as ground out.
Right.
Yeah, that looks a little weird, huh?
So it makes a ton of sense to me. The part I'm uncertain of is that's a weird. The part I guess the part that I'm uncertain of is how does the taper at the top improve the sweet spot?
There's more wood where you're making the most contact with the ball. So they
So I
did a
guess
study.
Is there though?
Statistically, they've shown
that's
that
what the
people are
study-
hitting it
that's
a little
what
bit
the-
closer to the
Right.
to
That's
the
what the
grip.
analytics team for the Yankees found out, that the most contact comes by the towards
By
the
the
label.
logo. Yeah, of course.
Right. So they wanted the most wood to be at that spot.
That was always the sweet spot. That was the sweet spot of every bat. What's happening though is they're creating a taper at the top now instead of it being uniform. It used to be uniform from the end of the bat
right
through the sweet spot. So now what they're doing is they're
No, it wasn't uniform. It was thinner.
I mean,
it was
yeah,
thinner.
it
was slimmer.
It was the thickest at the top, and then it would get skinnier all the way down to the handle. And now it's like it goes it goes up like so it's thicker in the middle instead of just gradually getting thicker towards the end. It's thicker in the middle, and then it starts to get thinner towards the top.
If you're watching this on silent and you're seeing the actions of this man right now.
Yes, well,
yeah, I'm a little unsure. Where it looks thicker to me is below the sweet spot. It looks as though they redistributed diameter from the top of the bat, which is useless, I do agree,
right,
to below the sweet spot, now closer to the handle, which would elongate the sweet spot.
So I think what they found out is that they make more contact in that spot.
Yeah, that's what I'm
right.
I'm agreeing with you.
Right.
There's no use in making contact at the end of the bat.
Right.
You make contact at the end of the bat, it
You're just
doesn't
gonna
matter.
Pop up, it's not.
You could make it as big as a fucking big red barrel wiffle ball bat.
Yeah.
It's not gonna.
There's a lot of memes of those going around as
right.
well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I think that this was a long time coming, to be honest. In pickleball, they have a similar thing. So it's just about surface area for pickleball paddle. They have many shapes and sizes. They're like dicks. You can get them in dozens of different. You can get elongated dicks. You can get short and fat dicks. You can get
Chode, if you will.
Yeah, you can get symmetrical ones. All that matters though is the total surface area at the end of it. So it has to be a fixed. I don't remember what it is.
Right. Yeah, it has to be. Right.
But if you want to get a wider paddle than it is long, you can do that. If you want to do a longer paddle than it is wide, you could do that. It just all comes at the expense of total surface area.
Man, what a bummer if you get stuck with a torpedo dick.
Yeah. Torpedo.
Not aesthetically pleasing.
Well,
Not that they are.
I think a torpedo dick would do some damage.
Don't you? I don't
Very,
know, like
very
thick in the middle and-
Anyways, back to baseball.
Aerodynamic, you know?
Well, I don't think this would have been that big of a deal, but the day that the Yankees trotted it out, they hit 8 home runs and scored 20 runs.
Yeah.
Three home runs from Judge, and he just missed his 4th. They hit off the top of the wall. So obviously,
I think it's good for
garner
baseball.
some attention.
I think it's good. It's like when the Maple Bats first came out, right? Like they just found it to be a harder wood, and the best hitters started using it, Barry Bonds, etc. And from there it was just like, oh, okay, Maples.
Do you
now
think
a thing.
every team will implement it? Like, do you think this is
or maybe it was a
much
softer wood? Go ahead.
Do you think this is a much a better bat? It's going to garner
know.
more home runs, more hits.
I think we'll collect that. I think there's clear signs to answer that question.
Right.
Like this isn't a guessing game. It's just a matter of data collection.
Yeah, and that'll determine whether the rest of the league implements them or not.
Yeah,
obviously, if it's clear advantage, everyone will go that way.
Exactly. Yeah, and baseball should be happy to do that. Right? Like if
yeah,
this
they
is
want
just
more
what
offense. More offense is always better.
if this is just what the new bats look like baseball should be happy to do that.
Yeah, home runs. People want to watch home runs. They don't want to watch.
They just want offense specifically.
Yeah, right, of course.
You know,
they got a lot of it from the Yankees this weekend.
Pitcher duels are
didn't get that much from the Pirates. They're down bad.
We're not going to talk about the Pirates.
Yeah, we shouldn't talk.
I'm very, very off.
You're done. You watched 4 games. You're out.
This is our 700th episode, and this is how you guys decide to lead in.
Sorry.
700.
You went with the one thing that you knew would bore the audience to death, and that I couldn't talk too much about.
I mean, it's very important discussion that we're having.
Let's talk about
Jesse
Jesse's
seems like he's having a great
clean-shaven face.
As opposed to
He's not normally super clean-shaven, right?
Jesse?
Yeah.
Can you even grow stubble?
Last time he was on.
I have a running 14-year, 12-year. I don't know how long it's been. Standing conversation with Kitty every time I see her where she says, "Why don't you shave face?"
As in, why are you so lucky that you don't have to shave your face? Or
I wish that's what she meant.
What does she mean? Because I truly do not think I've
He
ever...
usually has stubble.
Kitty likes a very
kind of
specific
guy.
type of man, and that type of man needs to have a very well-shaven face.
Well, by well-shaven, you mean look like he's 22. Then yes.
Yeah, that too.
I
Baby
understand.
face, completely hairless.
Right, I
That's her
understand.
move.
What I'm getting at, and I could be very wrong here, but I'm not a man who grows much face. This is it. This is about peak facial hair for me. No part of me thinks of you as a stubbly man.
Oh yeah,
He's
he
always
can grow
got
a pretty
stubble.
nice beard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yes,
I
he
appreciate
always
it.
has stubble.
Have you grown a beard?
Sort of. Not really. It doesn't fully come in great.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a good. I think I look best with some stubble, and that's about it. Unfortunately,
Okay.
the stubble's starting to whiten out a little bit.
Do
So now
you,
we gotta hit it with the razor every now and then.
So do
Not
you
a razor, but
do you have like an electric razor? You keep the stubble going?
Yeah,
That's what it is. You
Yeah,
just
I do one of
put
those.
it all the way down to 0 or whatever and go. Yeah.
That's my move.
yeah.
And
That's the way to do
I'm
it.
trying to learn how to do the sideburns in a more optimal way, but I'm having
Sideburns
trouble
are the
with that.
toughest, right? Especially if the hair starts growing out.
Yeah, the girl who does my hair always shows me how to put the comb in there and then go up with the razor. And,
right.
and I try to do it. It looks so easy, and I try to do it at home, and it's a disaster.
And you
This
fuck it up.
This is riveting stuff, guys.
Hey, before we venture off of baseball, I have 2 things to say, and only 2 things to add
All
to
right,
that
back
conversation.
to baseball. Let's go.
700th episode. I just want to reiterate that.
Hey.
Yeah, I
That's
gotta
right.
say, I was a little beside myself to find out you guys dragged me out of bed to talk about baseball bats until I realized that baseball bats was apparently code word for male genitalia.
Well, that should be.
I mean, I steered it in that direction, so I apologize.
That was one of the 2 things you had intended to say.
Yeah, and the second is when you say Yankees analytic team, all
Yes.
I can think of is that episode of Seinfeld where Costanza's just hammering home runs because he stopped having sex and his brain works better.
Right.
You guys remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
And that's, in my mind, that's the only
There
representative
have
of the
been
Yankees
some
analytics team.
Costanza memes going around already this weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that makes
How do you
sense.
not- right.
Yeah, it's very important that it's the Yankees that.
Oh, let's go, Guapo, for the win.
Uh,
Is that A-Rod, young A-Rod in there?
No, it was Jeter and
That's
Or sorry, young Jeter,
Bernie,
I mean.
Bernie Williams. I
Yeah.
think.
Wow, Jeter looks super young.
Very, very, very young.
yeah, he's like, yeah, so you can guys win the World Series. Like, we won the World Series last year. 6 games.
Okay. Moving on. 700th episode.
Hey,
Let's go.
Seven
go.
fucking hundred
that's
of
a
these
lot.
things.
And you're still talking about dicks.
Well, that was going to be an
What's
undercurrent
changed?
to every single.
What's different?
Yeah, what is different?
Your attitude.
It's good to stay true to,
Thank you, Landon.
you know. You say thank you, Landon?
Because Landon
That's
is the callback king.
Mhm.
I said, what is different? He said, your attitude, memeing sashimi.
Yes.
For everybody who doesn't know, about 3.5 years ago.
I remember that. That was a great moment.
I remember that was
Melissa
the first time.
posted a
That was the first time I got yelled at on the pod.
Yeah,
I felt really bad.
if you find that tweet, more power.
Oh,
Godspeed.
so good. Yeah. Melissa posted like a before and after pic or something.
Yeah.
And Sashimi said, what is
different?
Your attitude.
Which honestly, like, shout out to sashimi. Like that was
That's good.
that
yeah.
was A+ cattiness.
Yeah.
That was actually fun.
Your
'cause
attitude was a good follow up as well.
Great follow up.
Yeah.
that was when
Great callback.
That was when her and Joey were dating, I believe. And I was in this group chat with Joey and some poker players who were very funny. And this spawned this whole conversation of if we could have different octagon matchups in the poker world, who would they be?
Mm-hmm.
And we had some really good ones. But my favorite by far was Chew with Mikey D on his shoulders.
She was way too tall to have someone on his shoulders.
Well, that's the idea. And then it would be versus Big Jaffe with either of the Massies on his shoulder.
Right. Okay.
And that would be the chicken fight of the century, right?
I mean,
there.
I give a big. Choose skinny though. Yeah, you got a bigger base with Jaffe.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So we were on a wine tour in Australia one time, and for some reason, Chew put Mikey on his shoulders.
Right.
And
I feel like
they were
Mikey
on an
might
incline.
actually outweigh Chew.
He might. Well, when Mike was working out, he might have. But
Yeah.
Chew's got a strong base, man. You wouldn't know it, Well, you might know it, but he's surprisingly strong. But Mike got scared up there.
Yeah, I mean, you're 7 feet in the air.
Yeah, Chew's a tree. They're also on an incline. I think Mike thought he was going to drop him.
Oh man.
Not a short fall. Okay, getting to more pressing matters.
Then baseball bats?
Yes, then baseball bats.
Then chicken fights with you.
We will of course discuss the return of Airball, the Hustler stream that was on Friday. A lot of action there. But before we get to that, we have some. I don't know if it's news, but it's
news.
it's something. We're getting kicked out. They're evicting us.
We're done.
We happened enough to not or anything.
I know.
But we just got our 30-day notice.
Wow.
No big deal.
Yeah.
Been here.
Well,
You got
did
30
you do
days.
something?
I did not think that would have been the biggest rug pull we would have got this year.
No. So it's all
Yeah.
coming to an end. We will have our last show. Tentatively. I think it's the 25th is the last Friday. 28th. No, wait, that's this month.
Wait, what? No, Landon's got a big
25th.
bedroom, man. Let's just move it over there.
So that's a possibility. Whether that happens or not, to be determined. If that were to happen, we still have to have some sort of hiatus while we build a set and figure out what the fuck this show even is.
Man, give me 5 hours and a pizza, Burke. I got it.
Okay, well, I've
a good
seen
deal.
you pack, Guapo. You're gonna need 5 days
Okay.
and a couple Goodwill blankets.
Well, to be fair, 4.5 days is just worrying, and then
Right.
the other half is just
It's all put in the
6
plan-
hours of setup.
It's just 4.5 days of putting the plan together,
Yeah.
Right.
and then 6 hours of execution to the finest.
Can't believe we
done.
didn't take the glass off of that computer.
Unbelievable. That was what a ridiculous oversight. You know?
No, just put some blankets around.
But that's the crazy part. Like, we're way off on a tangent, obviously. but when we took, okay, so this is dating back to when we went to PCA.
This is our first travel.
Yeah, we had to fly across the country with our computer. Now, this computer is like very heavy duty, and the new fancy computers have the looking glass, right? Which, by the way, making it actual tempered glass instead of just like, you know, plexiglass. What are you, stupid?
Right.
What the fuck? I get it's high end,
right,
but do I really need something that can break?
Right.
No, of course not. Anyway, beside the point, we're packing this up and we recognize that the glass is an issue. And we decide, like, we're going to bubble wrap it, we're going to put blankets, we're going to do all this shit to secure this glass door on the computer. Never once dawning on us that the simple solution is to take the fucking door off. It's 2 screws.
Just take it off.
It's 2 fucking screws.
We'll put
leave
it
it here
on when we get home.
Because you want to know what, Lamanna? We had that door for about an hour.
Right. Yeah, we did.
We had it for about an hour. Yep. You know what we had for a lot longer than an hour? Me vacuuming out fucking tempered glass from the computer in Florida for like 6.5 hours.
It worked though. We got it.
It was fine.
We did get it to work.
We had to take the entire thing. I dismantled the computer like it was year 1 of Comp Sci all over again.
Yep.
And I'm sitting here just thinking, like, it's not even, we didn't even need a screwdriver. It was the threaded screws that, you know, for your fingers. Like, hey, in case you have to move this thing, here are 2 very easy, accessible screws that you can just unwind and take the fucking door off.
Well, we don't have to worry about it because there's no more door.
Won't make that mistake twice.
No, can't.
Can't.
Comp Sci?
Yeah. Nothing. Yeah.
Anything that you maybe the basis.
You'd be surprised. Computer
considering that he skipped door day at school, I don't know if you retained that much in the first place.
They didn't have doors back then.
You know, it's a strangest thing. I guess you're right because like I'm not that privy to what's going on now, but it really is the strangest thing for how fast technology moves. Computer languages tend to stay relatively dormant's not the right word, but they tend to be viable.
Interesting.
Like Java was just being introduced when I was a freshman in college, and I'm pretty sure JavaScript is like still one of the main object-oriented languages that's being used. It kind of took over for C++. And like, you know, I'm sure HTML is still pretty relevant. You know, the web is the web.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But to your point though, I imagine with like there were no apps when I was studying.
No.
I'm sure with like apps and the advent of all that stuff,
AI. Oh yeah.
You're using like a whole bunch of other languages that have, you know, been born into that world that I don't know.
Have you guys played with these websites that build websites?
Way like at the beginning of Solve for Why, I kind of fucked around with one.
Beginning of wait. No, I'm talking about like AI.
Better than what I did. It was literally like drag and drop.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, but it's if you don't know what you're doing, it's just a clusterfuck.
Yeah.
It's like somebody giving you a box of crayons and saying make art.
These are like talking to ChatGPT. It's pretty wild. Like you'll say, I want to build a website that does this. I'd like to have this style and do this, and it'll just bang out, write all the code out in one box, and then you know project it into another and window, and then you know you'll say, okay, I like this part of it, but I want to change this, and basically any idiot can build a website in a few hours. I know because I built one, and I'm terrible with this part of computer science. Yeah. It's really cool what they're doing. And then you could build apps now. And
it's interesting because like now we're really off on a tangent, but like you know how they always say like, oh, well, learn to code because then you can kind of always have a job, learn to code.
Literally beat me to the punch.
Yeah, and so like but like it's changing now from because like the AI can just code, so you don't need people to code. The AI can do it itself. What you need is to learn how to talk to the machines.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say that language will become more important.
Then you can unlock the actual real value of the AI systems.
I'm a little skeptical of whether or not you can fully replace a good coder. Like I think,
right. Well, maybe not
maybe
now.
down the road it'll happen.
Right.
But
I mean, I would imagine if this is like the early iterations, it won't be long.
It won't be
yeah,
long.
you could be right.
Right.
It seems like consensus is it's still pretty dog crap when you get into the minutia of it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think the aspect of it that becomes a bit of a mind fucked is that if it becomes prevalent at coding and on par with the best coders in the world or whatever, it'll build upon itself.
Mm-hmm.
So not only will it reach that level, but it'll become, infinitely better as it builds exponentially.
Right.
And which I guess like that's where the whole notion of like singularity or the AI taking over the human race, like all that stuff comes from.
Yeah.
Because if it can continue to build well beyond our scope, then basically it can write programs that, can effectively control the world.
Mm-hmm.
And now it becomes a matter of like, do we even have an off switch? Scary times. Can't wait.
Very scary.
Is it though? I can't wait. If this is how it all goes down,
you've been rooting for the end for a while, huh, Berk?
I mean, at what point do we peak?
Yeah,
man?
I'm with you, Berk. I'm not scared. Like people are like, oh, like it's gonna take over everything and we're all gonna be fucked. But like, you know what? Humans adapt. We'll figure it out.
I would be more scared of the beauty and joys of life being like sucked out. Like if sports started to get played by androids.
Yeah.
Or
right.
Yeah, like basically if everything becomes
automated
tech or automated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I at least like the mirage of control.
Yeah.
Even if we have
I think
none.
we're far away from that. Like I don't know. I mean, the way things move exponentially, we don't know. But like, I think that the human element is what people desire so much that like I think it'll stick around.
That doesn't mean we'll protect it.
Like you think like music, like like we're not gonna have music.
Bro, AI's already making bangers.
They're not making bangers like a human can make it. There's no way. The creativity is not there yet. Right?
It will
the creativity is not
yeah.
there with art, with music, with.
I don't think it's a lack of creativity at all. I think it's a lack of maybe.
But the creativity is what the human desires, right?
Well, I think we just gravitate towards likenesses, right? So like we identify creativity as something that appeals to some sort of population, whether it's a mass population or a cultic population. Like there'll be some following based off of this thing that's created, right? AI is already doing that. They're already taking these chats or comments from like, YouTube videos or whatever, and they're getting viral responses. Like this is a blend of music and comedy.
Yeah.
And it's pretty fucking good. It's not like, don't get me wrong. Like, of course it's not like elite level of these things, but again, like we're
only gonna get better.
We're dipping our toes in.
Right. Yeah.
One of the funniest memes that I can recall, when Facebook first started pushing viral memes and stuff like that was the quarterback chat, from the NFL. And it was this fake group chat with like all of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. So it was like Aaron Rodgers, Roethlisberger, Manning, etc., Brady, all talking to each other, and they're just talking shit. And it's like whoever wrote this is like very funny.
Right.
AI's just doing that now. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, you found that so fast. But it's like AI can just do that now from scratch. Like this is funny, and this took somebody quite a bit of time to conceptualize, to execute on, to write the bits for the jokes, the punchline, stuff like that. AI will scrape that, take that idea, and then just like, iterate on it infinite times over.
Right.
And you'll get a bunch of dog shit, but you also get some bangers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just going to be the way that I think like the creative space goes. I don't know, man. Like, it's funny. I saw somebody tweet something the other day and they were like, we were told that we should worry about AI taking our jobs, but like music and creativity and art will all be safe. Mm-hmm. And all I see is a bunch of dolly pics all over the internet while trucks are still being driven by humans. Yeah. And it kind of is like the exact opposite direction, because the first use case for most individuals is just a casual one.
Right.
It's the LML. Thank you. The LLM models, and then now the image ones. And the image ones are particularly helpful because so many people are interested in like the content creation space and all that other stuff.
Design
yeah, so like now they don't need a designer.
Yeah. Yeah, but I still think that like
imagine when AI can, and we're already here, by the way. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But imagine when AI can just like fully pull off a video edit for you.
yeah.
We already have it in simple terms. You could just take your gallery, throw 12 videos together, and then like lit your iPhone.
I think it'll be the people that can control the AI and talk to it the best that are going to thrive. Like you might still have a graphic designer, but it'll be a person using the AI as the tool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
In the early goings, for sure. It's just a matter of like with the exponential growth, at what point do we become useless? Who knows? Who knows? But I'll tell you this much: they wouldn't have to figure out what to do in 30 days.
Well, we do. We out of here.
We're getting the boot, man.
We are. We're done.
Oh,
That was a
AI is
long-
definitely
that was a long
going to like take over making decisions for BlackRock and buy up everyone's property and give us all the boot eventually.
It's probably true.
Man, I just saw that they're opening a rental home. What do you call it? Community. So they're building a bunch of homes, but they're only for rent, which is odd.
I feel like that. Yeah.
Why do they only? Why is it?
I mean, it'd be like building a giant apartment complex, right? Except instead of it being apartments, they're just homes.
yeah, that's
right?
super common.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
It is common? I didn't know that.
Well, I
it's
don't
called
know.
the ghetto. I mean, it's true. That's what projects are. Is like they're giant.
Right.
But those are apartment buildings, right?
Yeah.
Mostly?
Brian's just basically say, okay, so then you move to townhouses. Like this whole community is like 16 townhouses.
But you can buy these.
Buy
if you
or
want.
rent.
Obviously,
Yeah.
the owner of this place is selling it. That's why we.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, wish it wasn't. I wish it was 2017.
Just buy it up.
Oh, yeah, it would have been cheap.
Yeah.
Should have bought it then.
Right. Yeah. Skyrocketed in value.
Bro, I bought my first house out here for $108 a square foot, and it was a nice house.
Yeah, that's
That's
pretty
insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like, right to home about how it was a nice house though. It had a pool. It had the design was decent. It was like open floor plan.
good. What
It's a
did
good
I
house.
spend? I think I only spent.
What is the going
200.
rate now for square foot?
I don't know. That house I think is close
Probably
to
double.
300.
Yeah, it's maybe triple
Wow.
now. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I only paid like 160 per square foot to build my house.
That's to build. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, but it's gone way up.
Where I grew up, the base case for building now is going to be like $500 to $600 a square foot. But it's also one of the more expensive places to build. It's just blown up in terms of
Yeah,
property
the
prices.
vineyard's
Yeah.
big.
I mean, it depends on, like you said, location and
Yeah.
what you're building.
But imagine me like looking at places there and then looking here and being like, you could just
You're like,
buy
wait
a
a
mansion
second. Yeah.
for what you
Yeah.
can't buy a house
Mhm.
for. It's just so
Man,
sick.
houses were dirt cheap when we first moved here.
Yeah.
And none of
Yeah.
us capitalized on it.
Well, we moved here in 08.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
we
Right
literally
before
got
the
here
housing-
right before the bubble.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we just bought like a year later.
Yeah.
Would
Yeah.
have been way better. Yeah, for sure.
Well, we would have been in some. We would never still be in whatever we bought then.
No, of course not. But
We would have just been in like some 3-bedroom shack
Yeah.
that we got for $80K.
right.
Yeah, but you might be renting it out now for $80K
Yeah.
a year.
But yeah,
That's true.
be worth a lot more.
That is
No.
true.
Not that much, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. This will be the last thing I comment on this, and then we can move on. Since this is the 700th episode, and we're just bemoaning the fact that the show's coming to an end. But I haven't like started looking, and I probably won't, because I don't think it's like if we continue the show, I don't think it makes sense to get a whole new studio. Even if we could get this place at the price if we could get it at the price we originally signed for, I would keep it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's viable. Even if we like downsized or whatever, like I don't think we're gonna find a $2K a month place.
Right.
But I wonder if there are even any options similar to this on the renters market, because the last time I looked at the rental market, it was slim pickings, to say the least.
Yeah.
I think a little bit's changed in the last couple years out here, but there was a window between like COVID and 2023ish where the supply in Vegas.
I was going to say
of homes-
that's part of the reason why it's the price is skyrocketed. Supply is just way down.
Yeah, I remember
Demand is not.
there was a guy who played in our game. He sold his house at like peak in like 2021, like end of 2021, and was just homeless for like 9 months. because he couldn't find another place to move into.
Insane.
And he's like, it doesn't make any sense for me to rush and pay top dollar for something. Like the whole reason I sold was to take the profits. And now I don't want to go like buy an inflated piece of property when I know it's going to come down.
Right. Yeah.
So he's just like living out of hotels for like almost a year. But I'm very confident he did very well on the net of everything, even if you're paying a little excess in rent for a year's time or whatever.
Sure.
It's interesting. Even in 2012, when house prices were really low, there was, I don't really remember what things rented for versus cost, but it made sense to rent. I remember Dan Blitz living in like the top floor of Panorama and being like, yeah, I would never buy this place. It just doesn't make any sense. I'm paying like $25K a month or whatever, and it would just cost infinite to buy.
Yeah, I feel like when we moved out here early-ish, we were paying like sub $1 per square foot, which is pretty cheap when it comes to a rental market, especially in a city like Vegas. You know, it wasn't like we were in Des Moines, Idaho.
Des Moines, Iowa.
Iowa.
Des Moines, Iowa.
Potatoes.
I think the first place I lived in, Mike and I rented a 2-bedroom in Panorama, fully furnished for like, I want to say like $2,200 a month, and we're like,
that seems like a lot.
Well, we're
I mean, now it seems like nothing.
Yeah,
but like I'm thinking back to like when we first moved out here, I think we paid like $2K a month for a 5-bedroom.
But you were living in a house off the strip,
I think it was
right?
less than $2K.
I think it was less than $2K too.
Yeah,
I think my
feel like
monthly
it was like
rent
$1,600 or $1,700.
I think my monthly rent was like $300.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you were living in a house off the strip.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like prime location
For strippers, yes, we get it.
Well, just like down, like if in any
Can't
other
believe
city,
Ashley
if
was
you
okay
lived,
with that.
well, was she? Yeah, I think she was. If you lived in any other city, right in the center, like the heart of the best part of the city, I mean, not like quote unquote best part, but whatever, you'd be paying infinitely more for a nice furnished 2-bedroom apartment with all the amenities. that they included.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm exaggerating the point here because it should come at a premium to live on Las Vegas Strip.
Yeah,
that should be understood. And I would imagine that same place that you were at now, fully furnished, would probably be nearly double.
Oh, probably more. By the way, I want to defend Panorama Towers. We didn't just have strippers there. We also had drug dealers.
Okay.
Oh, that's
and
fair.
poker players. It was really a
And
poker
poker
player. I
players.
mean, it was a poker player's
Which
dream
I'm starting
come
to
true.
find out, you know, maybe there's a lot of overlap between those things. Yeah.
Yeah, the Venn
More than I thought.
diagram of strippers, drug dealers, and poker players is a big fat bullseye in the middle. Welcome to Las Vegas, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's talk a little bit of poker. Did either of you happen to catch the HCL stream on Friday?
I saw a little bit of it.
Pieces of it.
Okay, that's more
I
than
think I might have seen one hand. Is that when they played the biggest pot
of the year? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of an interesting pot where, so I guess I don't know how to equate this. So I think like when people see these hands break down, and Jesse, you can kind of attest to this a little bit, but I think when people see this, they'll just be like, oh, like what's so interesting about flipping for a whole bunch of money? Because the hand ended up being pocket nines versus ace king. And then you can go a little bit further and you can just say like, well, one or both of these guys drastically overplayed their hand. Because I think they ended up getting in like 350K-ish or 325K, something like that, playing 200, 400. Which
a lot of money.
Perhaps there was a straddle. So Keating 5-bet to 165 when they were 346 effective. Airball's choice to just call here.
Yeah, that was
very fascinating one.
Yes.
I don't know what flop he's looking to get away from.
You know, an ace or king high board.
I was gonna say like ace king queen, ace king jack.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It's also nice to
like, just get it in, man. Run it twice, right? Like.
So presumably you're only beating like ace king, ace queen type of stuff. Maybe with Keating was playing pretty wild. So
he gets after.
But whatever, you're beating like the 2 overcard hands.
Mm-hmm.
So clearing out equity when you expect your opponent to just jam all flops with those hands anyways is kind of nice, and then getting to run it twice from there.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. That's a valid point. It becomes a question of like, so if this is Queen 6-4, does he still call off? Presumably.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I literally meant like the ace and king and jack flops, or like the ace and king and queen flops. Like, I don't think that if it's queen king, maybe queen king, he folds. So
yeah, I think
maybe
if it's
containing
ace,
any of those two cards.
Yeah, I think if it's an ace or a king on the flop, you kind of have to fold. Like, you got to put them on something.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I would fold. I just don't know what Airball would do there against Allen. They had the most absurd meta going on in this session from what I saw. I saw this little clipped up like 10-minute YouTube.
Oh, that would have been helpful. I should have watched that.
It was nice. It was like 4 or 5 hands where they went bananas for a lot of chips.
And this is kind of the culmination of that. That's a really good point to bring up. So oftentimes in these games, what happens is they play bigger than the blind suggests, first and foremost. Secondly, oftentimes there's like a straddle, although it didn't seem like there was one here. It looked like Keating just 3-bet from big blind versus under the gun.
So, sorry to interrupt you. Somebody in the chat, or a couple people in the chat, are saying that it was 501k with 1k ante.
Oh, okay. That's.
I mean, it's still a lot of money.
I mean, it's still 350 big blinds, but it's a lot more reasonable, I suppose. And I do suppose that like once Airball chooses to 4-bet in this particular spot, the rest is just gonna find a way in. There's no 4-bet folds with pairs. That's for certain. And like from Keating's vantage point, it's like you kind of do just want to get the money in with ace king off pre. Although like, I don't know, man. I don't know how to analyze this kind of stuff, because it's like you could do one of two things, right? You can look at the positions and you can say, well, in the formation of under the gun versus big blind, where big blind 3-bets, we should probably be insanely polarized with our 4-bet. And here we have Airball, who's insanely linear. And as a response, since the 4-bet should be insanely polarized, Keating should be responding insanely polarizing. And like, if you're going to 5-bet ace king, it's kind of to like fold. It's kind of like your 5-bet fold if you have one, right?
Yeah, I think with normal people, you'd certainly.
Right.
Yeah.
But then we just look at the actual 2 people involved.
Yeah.
And it's like, do we care that this is under the gun versus big blind?
No.
Like, does that really matter very much?
No, it seemed like they were playing heads up with other people at the table spectating, from what I saw.
It's a really good way of putting it. And in those situations, for what it's worth, when you're Keating, ace king looks like fucking kings.
Has to.
Because it's just like, it's weird. It's such a weird proposition, because it's like, on one hand, you know that you could just never be in bad shape versus somebody who's going to stretch the boundaries of putting too much money in the middle. It's like, if the normal theoretical boundary here is like jacks some of the time or queens some of the time, Airball has 9s. Maybe Airball has ace queen here a lot. Maybe he just has the random ace X offsuit that he's bluffing with. So it's like, from Keating's vantage point, it's like you get to take a lot of liberties once facing the 4-bet, where it's just like, I can't really do much wrong in this particular instance. I think I want to, because like you could also make the argument, it's like, well, I would just jam over the 4-bet if I'm gonna try to play an all-in pot with ace king. But I like Keating's induction better, because it's like, you don't want to give him easy decisions with all of his hands that aren't pairs.
Yeah.
Which you largely dominate.
No, that I was about to say, I think if you asked Alan his thought process, at least some portion of it would be, for the sizing of the 5-bet or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Some portion of it would be, I thought that he would stay in with hands like king versus jam, like he would stay in with hands like king queen suited for like half of his stack, which would fold to a shove, and then make a decision on the flop. But I'm specifically dominating those. So it's really nice.
Or even like 9-10 suited, where it's like, okay, sure, I'm taking on some extra variance here, but I'm also running an equity. I'm running as an equity favorite, and that's important.
Yeah,
because I've already committed in my mind to die with this hand. One way or another, all the money's going in. I'd rather give him rope to put in money badly than I would give him an easy decision and then just flip the rest of the time.
Yeah, and also like if he's going to choose between those two sorts of hands, he will heavily lean towards like the better suited blocker type things, like king jack suited, king queen suited. So like You're just in this really nice spot where. No, I'm not saying. I mean, he would either use both.
Yeah.
Or he would use like the higher set which you dominate. So it's like it's gonna go pretty well, I think, for Allen. I mean, obviously when he has a pair, it sucks, but
I think one of the greatest lies that, and this is a counterpoint to all of this, because I think everything that you just stated is absolutely for sure correct. Full agreement. I think Keating played the hand very well. I would have done the same, especially with the meta. Like, I wouldn't give him the easy decision. I would click it here enough and create an SPR post, etc. But I also think one of the greatest lies ever introduced to the game of poker is that ace king versus a pair is a flip. Because like that's really only true when you start to talk about like the smallest pairs,
like ace king suited versus deuces.
In my experience, every time they have a hand that shouldn't be flipping but is, because you have ace king, like fours always win.
Yeah. But what? Yeah, for sure. And what I've always understood this, but I don't think I ever really put into my mind how big of a difference it is. Like in my head, I think I even said it on air. In my head, like ace king versus queens is like 54-46. So it's like 58. It's almost 60-40.
You're talking about ace king offsuit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at this
60-40.
It's so close. It's so much
60-40.
Way closer to 60-40.
I thought it was like 55-45.
I was thinking 54. Yeah.
This is borderline embarrassing that we're like.
I know, right? It really depends if you're sharing suits. If you're,
of course,
like all that is going to get 1 or 2%.
It's not going to be 1 or 2.
Not 1 or 2.
It's going to be like a half.
1%, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe up to 1%. But I think queens is like 56-ish, maybe.
Yep.
I think
it's actually like 57.
Yeah, tens is 57 for sure. Like the Broadway pairs perform
56.5.
The Broadway pairs perform incredibly well versus ace king.
Right.
Incredibly well.
Right, because they block the straights too.
But
that's a big part of it, yeah.
They don't get counterfeited as often, yeah.
Fundamentally, none of this really matters because by the time you put some money in the pot with ace king, you're just getting odds. So
yeah.
Also, there's like a range of hand, but yeah, I mean, yeah, you're not doing as well, especially when they call and then you are happy to put it on every flop and they're not folding any of the flops that hit you.
Right.
That's also an issue.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It is funny though, but like people have that mindset. It's just, well, I'm just flipping.
And the thing is like it's okay to have that mindset when you're not deep, right? Like it's a fine mindset. Like, yes, it's important to understand situations where like your hand has a seven.
There's enough dead money probably laying around that'll justify
the more shallow you are, any money in the pot is going to be dead enough to justify it, right?
Exactly.
But like, here's an example. Yesterday, I was playing 100, 200, and we're playing squid. It goes 5x open, call. I squeeze with 2 10s to 20 big blinds. And comes back to the original opener, he just jams for 350 bigs. So it's like, no, more. He jammed for, we were playing 100, 200. Sorry, he jammed for almost 500 bigs. And it's like, well, that's ace king almost always. And I'm getting a good price. But if he's jamming jacks through kings at a reasonable frequency, now I'm like a 60-40 dog instead of a 60-40 favorite. So the equity is effectively inverse. And in most situations, when you're facing all in and there's been 3 bets already placed, you're going to be getting way more than 1.5 to 1 on the pot. It's not even going to be remotely close. But in this instance, I've only put in 20 big blinds and I'm facing 480 more.
Right.
So I'm only getting laid like 1.2 to 1 on the pot. So now being wrong comes at a huge penalty because, and this is why I prefaced it with, it's an okay mindset until you get really deep because nothing stops people from still going all in.
Right.
You know, it's like, oh, okay, well, there's like 30 big blinds in the middle and I have ace king. I can't do anything wrong. 1,000 big blinds all in, you know? And it's like,
it's also just not that hard to mix in like some frequency of 2 kings, for instance, and make your life hell when you have those types of hands.
mean, yes and no. Well, yes, you're correct if you're okay with the sacrifice. Because what's happening is
you're sacrificing a lot of value.
Your whole range is performing worse.
Yeah.
On the aggregate than any other choice that you can make. But if you decide that like I don't play ace king particularly well in this spot, and I'm going to bank on it just being all in for any depth, I don't care. Well, you have to compensate now for the times that you get snapped off by kings or better, right? And you have to compensate for the fact that like you're an equity dog, a pretty reasonable equity dog when you get called by pairs, because nobody's calling you with sixes or fives. Like those don't exist. And no one's ever calling you ace queen.
Right.
So ace king now underperforms the times that you're called. The way to compensate for that is obviously to have pairs that dominate the calling range. So now you want to add in queens and kings. The issue with that is that now they underperform every time you get a fold. So there's this give and take where the aggregate of the range now drastically underperforms, but the hand that you might have the most trouble playing is now kind of doing okay, I guess. And the only cost is that like you may not maximize the spot with kings. But like EV wise, probably not a huge loss to just play your range that way. Maybe if you start shoving aces.
But you don't have to use kings that often for pocket pairs to hate life. Like
as long as you have queens and jacks a fair amount. Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, if you have all 16 combos of ace king and you use like one combo of kings, that's not enough. Or even two combos of kings, that's not enough. But like if you have 16 combos of ace king plus 3 combos of jacks, 3 combos of queens, now 1 or 2 combos of kings is going to be more than enough.
Yeah, I'd have to look at it, but probably don't need that many hands that are combos in there that are 80% to bring it down to, because you're getting such slim pot odds. I mean, there are a lot of blinds. It's hard because you have to define how many like like invisible blinds are in there based on the squid game too.
Yeah.
But
like even that aside, it's just the ratio. It's just the ratio aspect.
I guess you also have to take into account how often your opponent is going to fold like nines or hand,
or even has
or tens, or a hand that maybe it should call that now or is close to calling it that now just folds too often.
Yeah. That's all true. Being that I'm the 3-better, I think like you probably just want to account for.
You're just always calling.
Just me having ace queen a bunch, and then like smaller pairs than tens.
Yeah.
I mean, I tanked with tens. Jacks I would have snapped.
Yeah.
Because it's like I don't think he ever has nines, but I think you could.
You
have
called
tens.
with tens?
Yeah, I got scooped. King was dead too.
Of course.
Could be a sweet spot for him to just fire it in there with ace 4 suited occasionally too, so that your ace queens just binned.
I think that's better. I mean, it's really high risk.
Yeah.
Well, let's put it this way. I think to do that, you just now have to be willing to do it with more pocket kings.
Yeah.
So it just becomes a matter of like, let me reframe the entire conversation. If you feel like your strongest street is pre-flop, I think this is the proper strategy to construct.
Right.
I was about to say it's really funny that we're trying to construct balanced ranges for a person who's just only doing this to accommodate that they don't want to play ace king post.
Right. Yeah.
But I think that's very viable. And I think that's the biggest point I was trying to reach, was that the deeper you get, the theoretical distance you should have from being all in pre, it should require like many
like
bets.
You might be taking slightly the worst of it if you jam this ace king in this spot, but you're taking a lot worse of it if you decide to play it out for this many streets, being this deep against this opponent out of position, or something like that.
I mean, I think people can convince themselves of that.
Yeah.
I think in practice, hands just don't offer that much margin of error. Like you have to be pretty incompetent to like not be able to harvest the EV of ace king.
Yeah.
Even though obviously it's more challenging to play it out of position to a 3-bet during a carnival game. But like, yeah, that's the game. Yes. What you're describing is the game. It's like, would I rather push a very, 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 very minute edge pre, or would I rather try to, maintain a smallish edge out of position post? Like, it just comes down to stylistic approach. It comes down to where you think your edge is. Like, this particular player is a mixed game player. So like if he strictly only plays this game pre-flop, which in my experience, that's exactly how he approaches it. He just like only plays the pre-flop street impeccably.
This is a mixed game player?
Yeah.
Are they like a pretty aggro? Are they one of the mixed game guys that are pretty aggro and no limit, or are they generally like kind of tight, no limit, and play mostly mix?
Not sure. He's a very accomplished pro.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say
he's just
like,
good.
A lot of mixed game players, I could see just having aces here.
That would be insane. That would
agree,
I mean, I guess against me, maybe it's not as insane, but
bro,
like,
remember
it would be
2011 when like half the regs at the Bellagio high stakes game would just only have aces here?
Yeah.
That's how mixed game is. Like,
yeah, those were good times.
Obviously,
man.
there's a lot of very talented poker players in mixed games, but
yeah, I understand what you're saying.
There's just a lot of people who don't want to play the big bet games.
Of course. Obviously, he does though. He signed up for a strictly no limit game at Squid, but I think like the Squid caters to him or his strategy specifically because he feels sharp pre. I don't want to speak for him. I don't know what his overall strategy is, but I probably played like 25, 30 hours with him. And like, I'm very confident that he studies pre-flop and maybe nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just plays pre really well. And then post, it's just like find a hand that has more than 50% equity and yeet it, you know, and then let variance take the wheel. And honestly, it's not that bad of an approach in a game that is already super high variance, includes a squid over and over and over again. Oftentimes, I mean, my perspective is like people aren't putting enough money in post, so I want to see as many streets as humanly possible because that's where all the nuance comes in, like where all the hidden profit is, so to speak, getting them to fold in these dark corners where, you know, they just don't know what to do with one pair. They don't have any idea where their bluff catchers come from. But this whole lineup is constructed of like a lot of mixed game players. It's the Oaken game, right? So it's like, it's Oaken, it's JRB. They're pulling from a mixed game crowd. There are some recreationals in there, but even the Recs, you know, they kind of
Wait,
play.
was this streamed?
No.
Huh.
I don't get invited to the stream games. The stream games are too good.
I thought you were playing on the Venetian a lot.
Never. I played the stream once.
Oh, okay.
Well, only when Oaken was out of town. The non-stream games suck. The lineups are terrible. I mean, they're good if you're looking for action.
They're not good compared to the stream games, is what you're saying.
They're not good compared to like any private game either.
Yeah.
But they're like good enough that if you feel like you have a win rate, you'll play. Which debatably, I don't even know if I do. I've gotten my dick kicked in every single session I've played, so who knows?
Well, until you go back to the point where you didn't, and
yeah. Well,
I heard some stories about you smashing them.
That was a stream game. But that lineup was very good. But anyway, my whole point is that like it's constructed in such a way where there isn't a whole lot of low-hanging fruit because the way that the game plays out is it's 85% pre. So people that maybe don't feel as confident post-flop in no limit are still doing really well in these games. So it's kind of a mirage. You show up and you're just like, oh, like this guy barely plays no limit. Like I don't think he's really doing all that hot. And then you realize like he's playing pre-flop though, really exceptionally well. And then you like look at the stack transfers throughout the table, and it's like you're watching guys go on like 100K swings in like minutes, playing 100, 200, 124, whatever. And you're just like, I see what's happening here. Like every fucking hand is ace king versus a pair and getting just boatloads of money in the middle. And like that's ultimately bringing this full circle to the Keating hand. That's ultimately what the meta led to happening between Keating and Airball. But if that exact formation had presented itself hand 6 of the night, it would have just been a 3-bet pot. Like Airball almost certainly doesn't 4-bet, right? It's one of those things where it's like earlier in a session when there's really no meta in a deep stack game like that. Now I'm talking about the HCL game, not the Venetian game. In a deep stack game where everybody's looking to make moves, everybody's looking to make hands, you know what I mean? Like it's just very understood now the positional disadvantage here and that it's under the gun versus big blind and that Keating, though it's Keating, nines isn't the one. You know?
Yeah, nines is the one where you peel and there's like 3 people behind that you really want in the pot, and you have a great hand to play multi-way.
Yeah, and it's like you might just dominate him anyway. He might have like 10-9 or because he's doing shit. So it's like you think in different context earlier in the session because it's like, well, he's doing so much stuff, but this particular hand can't push a big equity edge because I'm mid-range, right? Like, so even all the shit he's fucking around with, the queen tens and if he's really out there, the ace deuce offsuits and all this other random shit that like Keating could be clicking with, it's like I'm not a huge equity. I don't have a huge equity edge against those anyway, and he could just have good hands. Like the lower down I am in my pair ranking, the more good hands he could just potentially have that he's going to take to the face. Every time I have nines in this spot, he could just have tens or jacks or queens or kings or aces, right? So it's like there's
but then you just call a 4-bet. And proceed because you have position, right?
Yeah,
they're so deep.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know how this went so quickly. Like Airball 4-bet to 60K.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't know how we're getting 60 bigs in with a 4-bet in position.
Yeah,
that's fucking huge. So assuming he opens 3, how big could Keating have got? 20, I guess.
Wait, how did Airball 4? I thought Airball 3-bet.
Opened and then 4-bet.
Oh, I see. You
see what I'm saying?
What
like
did Keating make it? 20?
He must have made it 20.
Yeah.
But you see what I'm saying? You're just not going to choose that path. It's
Yeah. I misunderstood the action. I thought Keating opened and Airball peeled behind, or 3-bet behind.
Right. No, that'd be way different.
My fault. Yeah.
Because it's like the purpose of 4-betting nines there, if you're pushing an advantage, is largely to leverage folds.
Yeah.
And that ain't happening. Like we can agree that ain't happening.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Just play position with like the biggest stack to pot ratio possible.
Right. Precisely.
With a hand that's really nice with a bigger stack to pot ratio.
Yeah, and I think where that goes out the window is when the meta changes, right?
Yeah.
So if Squid Game is on, if you're at the tail end of the session, if you guys have played a dozen other pots, kind of as you mentioned, where Keating has just shown up with the fluffer nutters over and over again. It's just like, well, you know what? Maybe I fucking caught this guy. And maybe I might even get to a point where like he levels himself with 8s or 7s or an over and an under, like an ace 5 suited type of hand, something like that. I can understand how it devolved into this pot being played. What's just crazy to me is that I think that for the viewer, I think for the viewer, this just looks like 2 guys wailing around.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for somebody who's like in that space a lot, I very much understand how this hand played out, how unfair it has to feel to Keating to get scooped here also. But also like how thrilling and kind of justified Airball must feel because he went with it. He kind of like quote unquote had the courage to stick in all these fucking big blinds with a mid pair and just like know he had his man not dominated, but in worse shape than he could possibly be in himself.
Yeah, I almost can't wait for you to watch the little clip together, 3 or 4 hands before it, because every hand is just so wild.
I'm interested for it. Let's check out Airball's interview really quick. Hear his thoughts on what the spot was.
I want to make sure I have the right one. Is it?
Nope. The one I sent's like a minute and a half. Yeah.
Here we go.
Nick, Airball, first game back in a year. You win $282,000. How's it feel?
Feels good. My goal was to play a big pot with Alan, and I was on the right side of it, so I'm really happy.
689K pot. It's a pretty big pot.
Is that the biggest pot of the year?
Yeah, that's the biggest pot of this year.
King is back, baby. King is back.
What were you thinking in that hand? Walk us through your thought process.
I think usually, like when Alan 3-bets there, I'd probably just call with 9s, but you was just playing so crazy today, so I was like, probably have the best hand, I'm gonna put more money in, so I re-raised him, make it like 65,000. I was very happy with my situation as he was sitting there, and then he started cutting out raising chips, and I was no longer that happy. But Alan's so capable and stuff, so I thought about kind of thought about all my options pre-flop. Almost folded. Thought about jamming, and then in the end, I was just like, I can't live with myself if I fold nines here, and it's the best hand. So I decided to call and fade an ace or a king and die, and fade an ace or king and got it in.
Do you feel like the King of LA is back?
100% the king is back. You know, have some beers, win the 700K pot. Life's good.
Congratulations.
Land the 4-5. They need to play games with you.
Nick Airball.
I gotta tell you,
It's a good choice. It was a good choice, right?
I know I give Airball a fucking ton of hate, but I actually truly do believe that it's very good for poker to have him in the public eye, so to speak, or like in these stream games. I think he plays the role well.
Mm-hmm. I wonder how many of those beers he drank. They look like
I don't think any
beers.
I don't think any until off air, to be honest.
No, he was
pretty
drinking.
sober.
He was drinking during.
Oh, was he?
I mean, during that clip, yeah.
Well,
He had
that's
2 beers.
yeah,
there.
but that's after I said till after the session.
Oh no, I'm sorry. The clip of the actual hand with him. And Keating.
Oh,
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think like he's good for the spot because he really rides the highs and lows. Like he wins a flip for 650K there, and he's like, "I'm back, baby. King's here." Thought I left.
Yep.
Throne is back. It's like, okay, well, you know, you get scooped there. Trust me, I've been scooped. You get scooped there,
Right.
some of the time, and I think like when he gets scooped, he plays the role of a loser equally as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just coming out in that specifically that jersey is so good.
It's funny for a couple of reasons. I mean, it's obviously funny because of the reference to Jordan making his comeback from retirement.
Right.
Of course, that is understood. But it's also funny because it looks like he shopped at the Baby Gap. And
Now, what
got
makes
about
you,
6
what makes you
sizes.
say that?
I mean, that's honestly the most flattering of the images that I saw. He had a baker's dozen on the side there.
But here's the thing, like you know, we all see it and we're like, oh yeah, okay, Jordan's comeback, whatever.
By the way, that reference is dated for at least half the audience.
That may be true.
It is funny.
Landon's like, what the fuck? Who's this Jordan guy?
Right.
But
Yeah. Even the
23
song
was in the rafters,
song
right?
is dated.
Yeah, even Jay-Z and Linkin Park.
Right.
People don't actually think to do that, you know? Like I
Right.
wouldn't have shown up with that jersey, and
Right.
it's kind
He's
of
a
like
showman.
Mm-hmm.
but it's also like a bit of an insight to his mindset and like just
He
generally
thinks
the
he's
type of
Jordan?
person who like manifests or whatever, where he's just like, this is going to be my
Yeah, yeah.
return, and
Yeah.
Right.
and it's going to be important for like reasons that are only in my head, but now are like out there.
Right.
Which like, you know, I don't want to get all like hippie about it, but I don't know. It's kind of cool.
I mean, he
it-
should have worn LeBron because LeBron thinks he's the best, but he isn't.
Jesus Christ. No, your point though. Your point though is like very true, and like especially the way that he won, like he won it all in a huge flip. So it's like that almost feels like controlling the cosmos in some sort of way, right? Like I made this my special night. I came out donning the 4-5. Obviously, when it comes down to the luck factor, it's going to be in my favor. And I think like a lot of people love to subscribe to that notion of luck is where preparation meets opportunity.
Yep.
And it's like, I love that phrase.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like so inspiring. But, you know, the realist in me, the math guy in me just also realizes it's utter bullshit.
I can't believe you're going to sit here and call it luck. The man cleared out equity, saw a safe flop,
Right.
and got it in at like 77%.
Yeah.
I can't argue with that.
I need you to respect the airball.
Put some respect on his name. Oh, man, I would be reeling if I was in Keating's shoes. And like it's one of those spots where you just like run it through your head a million times over. Where it's like if I just jam run it twice, I'd probably chop.
I'm starting to get the feeling that none of this shit bothers Keating. I got a feeling he's doing quite well.
No, he's definitely doing quite well. Whether or not it bothers him is a totally different discussion.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, we're all competitors at the end of the day. Like it doesn't matter how much money you have. Losses hurt.
Oh yeah. Well, they did have some banter. It seemed like where.
He also left after that, right?
Oh, did he?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Ah.
I don't know if that actually officially ended the stream and they were just like, oh, okay, Keating left, we're done. But I'm pretty sure that he brought like
Well, was he
500 or
was
something.
stacked, right?
Yeah.
So maybe he only brought. I mean, when you're playing 500 1K,
Right.
and maybe you expect people to play a little tighter than they would have at like 2-4,
Yeah.
and you bring 500 for the night,
Yeah,
you're
okay.
probably like, yeah, that's enough.
Should be. It's good. Yep.
Let me tell you something. As somebody who fancies himself a bit of an action guy.
It's never enough.
And I'm not putting myself on Keating's level of debauchery when it comes to rifling off chips, but I don't hold back. I'm not exactly known as small bet Berkey. 5 buy-ins when you're Keating is certainly not enough.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because 500 big blinds when you're Keating is 1 buy-in. So you need 5 of those.
That's like
2.5 million
river hero
play right
calls.
in this game.
Yeah, I mean, like 500. I can't explain to you, but just trust me. 500 big blinds in a dynamic like this goes in really fucking easily.
Well, we saw it, right?
In a 3-bet pot. Well, I mean, that was like all the. But I'm just saying, in just a normal 3-bet pot, a 3-bet pot, tripling it off. You can put 500 big blinds in the middle, no problem. And it doesn't have to be set over set by the end or flush over flush or anything of that sort. It could be a pair and nothing. Yeah. It's just, that's the way the game has evolved. We are learning it in a very interesting way. I'll kind of like put a button on this conversation so we can save something for the rest of the week. But I don't know if you heard the interview Ike did with GTO Lab podcast with John Jaffe. This was maybe
a while back, right?
4 months ago, 3 months ago.
Who did it? Ike?
Ike.
Okay.
John Jaffe's the host. You know John. You know John, right?
Yeah, he's a great interviewer.
I think he is too. I think he's really he's fun.
Yeah.
He keeps the conversation fun.
It was interesting because I saw his interview with Ben Tollerine.
Yep.
And they both talked about how they never wanted to do any interviews with people. And Jaffe was like, I basically never did an interview in my life until I controlled it by being the interviewer.
Sharp.
It's kind of cool.
So, may not believe this, but I was the same. I didn't do any media until like I started Solve for Why, basically. And Jonathan was the right guy to interview Ike for what it's worth. But they got into the conversation about solvers, and I think Ike made like the most illuminating comment that I've heard any smart person be willing to say without fearing being roasted by his peers. But I've personally subscribed to this. I've beat this drum a lot, and I think it's very accurate. We solved No Limit Hold'em heads up, and we solved it for a 2-player game. Mm-hmm. We pretend that the extrapolation then works on multiplayer 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. But like Ike's point is that just because it looks like good poker to us, we've kind of accepted it as the proper strategies and what theory is supposed to look like in these realms. But there's a good chance that we just are getting it largely wrong. Maybe we're getting some things abundantly correct, and maybe we're just like missing the mark terribly on others. And he had mentioned a couple specific examples. I can't remember if he mentioned the collusion effect of multi-way or not, but personally, like that's one that I think has a big impact on this type of stuff. But the bigger point was just that, yes, all of the information we have right now is the best that we can do, and it's great guidance. But if you believe that it is biblical in nature and that this is exactly what you need to subscribe to in order to be good at poker, you're probably kind of thinking about it all wrong, and you're way too in a box that may just be the wrong fucking box.
Yeah.
And the reason why I state that is because of depth. So the multiplayer aspect of it is a very easy one to point to and say like, well, heads up looks very different than 3-way, 4-way, 5-way, 6-way, right? The biggest way that that's illuminated is if you look at like 500 big blind poker. So when you look at like 500 big blind heads up, you just like 3E a bunch of spots in 3-bet pots with like ace king, ace queen, whatever on ace high boards. So it's like you flop a pair and you just play stacks. Doesn't matter. SPR is 30, 25, whatever. We just go for it, right? Because you have 2 fixed ranges that are playing off of one another in a very controlled way. It's a raise and it's a 3-bet and it's heads up. So like those ranges are very fixed and finite. But when you insert a third range, which is now dependent upon the second range, which was dependent upon the first, and they kind of have a little bit of a dynamic nature to it, where it's like, well, you could like, I don't know this to be true, but let's presume that it's let's presume it's true for this example. Let's say that player 3 is supposed to VPIP like 17% versus raise and a call, right? forget formation, everything. Let's just assume it's 17%. But let's assume that there's 3 different ways that you can construct 17%. You could construct 17% with like upper left and down linearly. You could construct 17% with like a relatively polarized, like upper left, upper right type of construction, or you could blend it in some sort of capacity. But point is that through the 3 constructions, some hands exist and some hands don't, right? That seems very viable when you're talking about multi-way dynamics. And if that does end up being true, everything kind of breaks at its core, right? The reason why when we look at multi-way spots or when we look at just a 9-handed game and break it down to heads up, the reason why we're able to extrapolate anything out of it is because we assume that there's no dynamic nature to the decisions people can make. We assume that if range A plays a certain way, then range B has to respond in a very static way, and so on and so on and so on down the line. So we don't give the option, so to speak, to play 6% in a myriad of ways. It has to be in a fixed way. And from that, we build out strategies and things of that nature. When you add in depth, if you just start playing 3E in a, button versus low jack 3-bet pot with like top pair for 500 big blinds, probably going to get shown a set.
Yeah.
Probably going to get shown a set quite fucking often. And I think that that's a byproduct of the ranges not necessarily responding as predicted. Whether practically or theoretically, totally different discussion. I'm way off on a tangent now, but my bigger point is that like it seems as though the more players that you introduce, the more options are on the table. And that's not to say we can't solve it. It's just that we're like, we're not exactly there yet.
Yeah, I think there's also something to be said for, and maybe this is kind of what you're alluding to, when you have different pre-flop parameters, things change really quickly post-flop.
Yeah.
So like if you like you were talking about different pre-flop, like do we want to go polar? Do we want to do this?
Yeah.
If you just switch out some like ace X suited for some king X suited,
precisely,
you're losing slightly pre-flop, right? But you reach all these spots on the river where they're like, wow, they just have like so much ace X here on like a 2 ace board, and maybe they do like a little bit of additional folding. And then all of a sudden you actually don't have that much ace X. And it just changes equities so crazily on the river.
Right. Like we can examine them all in isolation, but we can't really see the fluidity of it if these variables were to just change.
It's tough because we're not. So the way that like Munker Solver would work is it would run out all of these iterations and it would look at like values on the river with different ranges and stuff. And if it ran for long enough, it would look at every possible scenario and then get back to pre-flop and say, okay, these hands are how you play based on all of these scenarios. But then we take those things and we say, okay, now we have these ranges. Let's play river.
Right.
And it's kind of it's an efficient way to do it, but I don't know if it's necessarily the correct way to do it, because if like you said, like if the parameters change slightly, then all of a sudden river changes considerably, and the computer can like do a ton of calculations to figure out how this works, but we don't really conceptualize that very well. And then I think what Ike said about multi-way that really like struck me was he was like, yeah, we don't know if multi-way is correct. He was like, we don't even really have a game theoretical way to define what
precisely
what unexploitable means in a multi-way setting.
Right, which I think was kind of alluding to the occlusion effect. So in essence, like in a heads-up scenario, there's a single equilibrium. But multi-way, the idea is that there could potentially be multiple equilibria, and we can't even really define necessarily how many. 1, 2, 3, endless. It's difficult to say. So if it does, that was kind of what I was trying to articulate with the 17% example.
Yeah.
Of imagine that there's like a dozen equilibrium or equilibria that the hijack can play versus 2 actions in front of him. Well, dependent upon which one he chooses, the strategies are going to alter drastically. And sure, you could just take an aggregate of them and say like, well, that's his average range here. But now you're not very accurate in your strategies. And I think that was we're landing on the same point. That to me was the most illuminating thing that Ike had said.
Yeah.
Where, people who are super dogmatic to the way that we train now should kind of stop and take pause and say like, no, it's really critical. It's still very critical that we think. Like,
yeah.
These tools are best to teach us how to think, not how to act.
I think the river thing that I was talking about where like you could have more king X suited or ace X suited, is a good example of that because, or a good way to identify that because it's so much more important to have some understanding of if this person is like more than capable of bluffing in a spot or less than capable or just capable enough.
Yeah.
Than it is to prioritize like these very thin combos that are bluff catching at 0.01 big blinds gain or whatever.
Right.
And having like an understanding of like your calling down threshold in these super deep pots is like so much less like it won't yield you as much EV as just having like a better understanding of the players in the game and a million different other factors outside of that type of study. The coolest example I want to say of why 3 players like difficult is have you guys ever played PokerStars was putting it on in these live tournaments one time, but have you guys ever played this second best hand wins game?
No.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
I could be wrong, but I'm convinced that there's no solution multi-way. Like there may be a solution multi-way for no limit hold'em,
Mm-hmm.
but in this game I don't think there can be a solution multi-way because if the third player just plays badly, it screws you really hard.
Right.
So basically, like the second best hand wins. So when your head's up, you're just playing like inverse hold'em, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But when you have 3 players, like let's say you have a really bad hand. So you're like, okay, this guy bet, I'm gonna raise, get like the third player out of the pot, or only one of them's gonna continue, and then I'm gonna have like let's say you have the nut low, right? And then I'm gonna win. But if some fish just has like jack high, and he's like, this is probably the best hand, and meanwhile you're sitting on 3 deuce, and then the other fish just like heroes you off with like king high, all of a sudden you don't have the second best hand.
Right.
So and like them sticking around screwed you. So there's like some wild stuff that goes on, and I'm somewhat convinced that game can't be solved 3-handed because
It's it reminds me of I can't remember like what the premise of this is, but I think they use it a lot in contests where it's like a range of numbers, let's say like 1 to 100 or whatever. And I could be misremembering this. Like I'm very foggy on it, but basically like you want to get as close to the number as possible without duplicating someone else's number.
Okay.
No,
so just picking a random number.
Yeah, but I'm doing something wrong. I'm giving something incorrect here.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's like the highest number wins. The highest.
I know what you're talking about.
It's the highest number chosen that's not duplicated is what wins the contest.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah, these are fun.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's very it's very similar in nature.
You're never gonna pick or are you gonna pick 100? Maybe you would because nobody else would.
I've done
That's
giveaways before where you guess what chips I'll end with on a day,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of similar. Where it's like you want to guess a high number because if you win, you want it to be. If you're the closest, you want it to be
something.
yeah. But at the same time, like everyone's going to guess a high number for that reason.
Right.
So then you have to game it out.
Yeah. But I guess to your point, what I was trying to articulate with that particular strategy is that the impulse is to start at the way our minds work is we iterate kind of end backwards, right? So it's like the impulse is to start with the absolute highest number,
Mm-hmm.
and then you determine like the probability of anybody else choosing that number. You realize that it's very high, and then you start to look for like interval pockets where it's like, okay, well, where do people emotionally start to feel like it's too low of a number to pick?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And now, what's the probability? And I think that there might be a solution to this problem. If I'm not mistaken, somebody in the chat smarter than me probably will know.
Obviously, it depends on how many people are participating in the contest.
Yeah, but that's just like an n equals kind of.
Okay.
If it has a solution,
Right.
it'll just be like that sort of way.
All right.
But I also could be like dead wrong, and there might just be no solution, and like who knows? It could just be randomness. But I find these
Should
problems.
we do it in this room right now?
Yeah. I find a lot of these problems to be very fascinating to think about, and I feel like I don't spend enough time to like that pops in my head because I feel like 15 years ago I thought deeply about it, and now I've forgotten like even the parameters of the contest, so I definitely don't remember like any solutions that I landed on.
Yeah.
But like even talking about it out loud again, it's like, oh, now my curiosity's peaked again. It's like, oh, well, I would like to solve that puzzle. I think like logic problems and stuff like this are really helpful for poker players.
This reminds me of the other morning my friend sent me this like algebra problem from high school or whatever. But now that we're reaching that age where it's come full circle, and he was like, "What'd you get here?" And it's like you have
it's where you do order of operations, right?
Yeah, it's like you have a table with a cat sitting on it, and like a number for the height, and it goes like from the top of the cat down to like a turtle above the ground, right? So you have like turtle, table, cat, and then they switch the cat and the turtle, and I could probably find it online or something so you guys can have an image, but it doesn't matter. So I do the math on my phone notes app. And the whole time I'm doing the math, I'm like, I'm such a psycho. Like, why am I doing this? You know?
Yeah.
And I tell my friend, I think it's this. And he was like, yeah, I got that too. And I was like, yeah, there it is. I was like, I actually guessed what it was in my head correctly, but I ended up doing the math anyways and sent him that I'd done the math on the notes app. And he goes, bro, and he sent me the exact same math on the notes app. And then he goes, I talked to another one of our friends who we both think is really smart. And he goes, all he did was just take the average of those two table numbers, and he got the same number as us. And I was just like, for fuck's sake, like,
right?
That's so good. And I don't even know if he knew that
Work
would
smarter,
work.
not harder.
I don't know if he knew that would work, but he was probably like, yeah, that gave me a number. And I just like worked backwards and realized it was the right number.
Yeah.
And I put a couple other like different examples with different numbers for the two tables and realized that the way he did it is perfectly acceptable. So I like these problems where there's like way more than one way to skin a cat, and you kind of get to figure out who's thinking on different levels or who's thinking differently,
more efficiently.
Yeah, this stuff's cool.
Yeah, math and logic are fun, guys. Stay in school, get your education.
Yeah,
that's right.
All right, that's gonna do it for us today. Not for good just yet.
Can I tell you a story before we end?
Absolutely.
Since it's the 700th episode.
700th episode.
And it's kind of relevant to you guys being evicted.
Kicked right out on the curb.
Yeah. So the other day I played the Mystery Bounty tournament at the Horseshoe Casino. And it was like one of my first tournaments I've played in a very long time. And after I bagged, this kid that I was talking to at the table, like a little bit, just randomly because we were across the table, really nice guy. After we bagged, we were leaving, and he was like, "Hey man, like it was good talking to you." He's like, "It's like I know this sounds weird, but like I watch a lot of the Only Friends podcast." He's like, "So I feel like we're friends even though you don't know me because I just like have heard you talk a lot and like I know your opinions on stuff." And that was really cool. And I think that you guys should consider trying to keep the podcast going potentially, even if you did it less days per week, because that kind of stuff is really cool.
The multiple days. I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and they all focus on the daily aspect of it, and that's I don't want to speak for everybody else, but like to me, that's not the issue at all. Like I don't know if you guys feel like it's way too taxing to do one every single day or whatever the case may be, but. From my perspective, like that's the last problem to tackle, and also what I think is like unique about the show and the quote unquote void that it actually fills. Like I think people want some version of daily content. That's what I think makes us valuable.
Right.
Is that we are there every single day. Like they get that vibe from you because they see you a lot.
Yeah.
If we were once a week, we might have you on once a month, and it's just like now less Jesse.
Right.
That's a terrible.
I agree. We have you
sentence.
5 days this week. Everybody's gonna be fucking amped. But like it's 90 minutes a day, an hour 2.5 maybe with pre-production if we're being really diligent. to me, the problems all come from the within, the structure aspect of it, the motivation, the purpose behind it. When I launched this, one, it was a marketing tool for Solve for Why, which by and large, especially now with us being evicted from this place, is
We're
going
not
to
evicted. Just
that's a fucking eviction notice.
That's
no,
basically
it's not like you
that's
get
an
evicted.
eviction or buy this place.
Listen. As the manager, we paid the rent. All right.
Okay, yeah. The reasons we're being evicted are not our own.
Okay.
However, we're out on the curb. But like with that coming into play, and everything else, like Solve for Why is scaling way back. It was always a passion project, and I've been beating this drum for a while. Like I just don't think the training space is flourishing for the small business. I think it's absolutely carved out for the GTO wizards of the world, and I think that's the direction it should go. Tools are going to be way more first and foremost for Solve for Why. Well, it doesn't serve that purpose really much anymore, and I don't know that it really ever did, to be quite honest.
A little bit,
but we weren't out here like daily shilling, we weren't running
as much as I tried to get you to do it.
Right.
But we got to promote this shit.
Yeah, we weren't doing like for this type of content in this space. I thought there was just like a hunger and a need for daily consumption of poker, and the media just wasn't hitting it, right? Like shout out to Poker.org and Poker News and everything that they do, but they are very much behind the times with how they approach poker media. They're still quite written. Most of it is written. And then to their credit, they've shifted a lot into short form. And I think short form is insanely valuable. But I think that they lack the ESPN model. And poker's not that visual. I understand it. But there's nothing for people to tune into, right? They might catch an article here or there. They might see a reel while they're scrolling, but there's nothing that retains their attention in the poker media space at all. And I'm not saying that as a slight to them. It's just straight facts. There's no good content out there being published by any of the media outlets that will grab eyeballs for 60 to 90 minutes a day. So I thought, like, look, I love sports, and I grew up watching sports night. A whole new way sport. It's like this for sports talk radio, and ESPN tried this for many years, and they were very successful, but also like they did it in a way that kind of appealed to an older generation and was a bit obnoxious. The Stephen A. Smiths of the world, the Skip Baylesses, the argument shows, right? They wanted to take two talking heads and pit them against one another and just duke it out. Pat McAfee went a different route. He was just like, you know what? I'm just going to be the guy at the water cooler shooting the shit with my peers. And that was a fucking home run. So I was like, okay, we're going to do the same because we can, not because we're the best suited for it. And I still to this day don't believe that we're the best suited for it. I don't know who is. Maybe it's somebody with like a higher profile, like a Dean Eggs. Maybe it's somebody who is up and coming that has a bigger circle of friends the way that we did 15 years ago, and they're all on the grind together. Like, would love to tune in to 6 or 7 26-year-olds talking about like, their progression and them. But the thing is, that age group, that group of friends that's out duking it out in the studio or traveling the circuit or whatever, are focused on that thing.
Right.
We're kind of like in a privileged position where we can have hindsight and be able to take a step back from our daily. Point is like, I don't know that we're the best for the job, but we're the most available for it. Well, now 3 years into the experiment, where I've enjoyed every second of it, I'm looking forward to the final 20-ish shows. I've had very similar experiences as to what you're referring to, where people stop me, tell me how much they love it. It happened last night at the Venetian. I'm so appreciative of it, but I just don't. I lost whatever sense of purpose there is. I don't think the community, though I think that there's a hunger for it, I don't think that it is a product that the community overall values. I don't think anybody would invest in it. I don't think that, and this isn't just us, I think like no matter who did it, I don't think media would invest in it. I don't think that distribution platforms would invest in it. I don't think that operators would invest in it unless they could completely control the message, which for anybody who
at that point,
for anybody who wants to do this for real doesn't want that looming over them. And then secondary, as far as like scaling internally where you don't need to rely upon that outside funding in order to make it, it's almost impossible. You know, there's no, you have your core audience that shows up for you loyally day in and day out. Shout out to all you guys. You're the fucking best. You keep us going. But the videos that do numbers are the ones where there's a cheating scandal or some other like, you know, hot button issue. But it's, you know, it's just very challenging to show up and watch the numbers steadily decline.
Yeah, that's very frustrating. I can understand that for sure. I think I had a question based on that, I guess, but
no good.
Do you find that you have an uptick in volume during big series, like for instance the World Series?
It depends. We have an uptick in consistency during the World Series for sure. But it really just depends on how much cooperation there is between us and whatever the thing is that's going on. So what I mean by that is like if we do an engagement, for instance, with WPT during the Win Series. So here's a perfect example. Year 1 of the WPT Championship at the Win, we did a 2.5 month long engagement with WPT Global. And that was supposed to lead to us doing a live show from the Win itself, which fell through. But our average viewership per episode during that 2-month window was like 4 or 5x what our average viewership is the rest of the year. With like the following year, we covered the same event, collaboration between us and as it was what was going on, but we also covered WSOP. Didn't put quite the same focus on it. I think we did like, so where were we the year prior, but 1 year later.
Yeah.
But like they ended up during that time frame. So I think like at the end of the day, it really comes to a collaborative effort show that wants to, you know, water cooler talk or however, because to decide day in and day out, and quite often we find, we talked about HCL, like the Venetian stream, and you know, maybe there's a tournament series going on somewhere, whatever. We talked about strategy quite a bit, and even after 3.5 years of testing this, I still have no idea what hits on the aggregate. I know what hits at the extremes. Right. I know what will draw in the largest viewership, and I know what will draw in the lowest viewership.
Don't say Pirates.
Pirates are very much close to the lowest viewership. Interview episodes of people not in the space.
Right.
Hands down the lowest.
Yes. Nobody cares.
We interviewed Adam 22 and we interviewed
you interviewed Adam 22 and it didn't do well?
Yeah.
Insanely poorly. It was like our
That's wild.
It was like our 13th episode.
Who was the bodybuilder guy, Matt?
That's who I was thinking of.
Because
I apologize
huge
because
in
I
the space,
keep wanting to say Jay Cutler and it wasn't.
It was not Jay Cutler.
No. He's an Englishman and I know exactly who he is. I'm just confusing him with Jay Cutler at the moment. He won Mr. Olympia 6 times.
Oh yeah.
Jesus Christ. Dorian Yates, sorry. Okay. So yeah, we interviewed Dorian Yates, legend in the bodybuilding community, but like not our core audience. Did like 3,000 views. You know, so it's like
that's why. Like I could see that stuff like that doing worse because it's very niche.
But even in the
to have
poker
a
space,
big name like that seems kind of wild. Not
even
to
in
do.
the poker space, it does worse. We have Matt Hunt on as a special guest. It does worse. We have Barber on as a special guest. It does worse. If we lead with those things, if we lead with, chop pot goes the wrong direction, and then we happen to have a Barber interview.
It's got to be controversial.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like now all of a sudden, like it does normal viewership. And look, like that's the game. That's not what I'm miffed about. Obviously, it's more so that like I didn't sign up, and I don't really care to move forward. Like I don't want to replace Poker.org or Poker News.
No.
My mind was always collaborative. It was like, okay, well, if we establish ourselves and we do a pretty good job, we'll find a way to collaborate with tours, with operators, with media. Like every one of these tours are hiring media companies for 6 figures. Maybe not. Maybe that's exaggerated. Like I know that they get paid very well for like WSOP, probably WPT championship, major events. We're talking like 6-figure contracts. But even like the more minor tours, 5-figure contracts for sure. And it's like in my head, it just seemed like we would always be an asset there. Like why wouldn't you want people this engulfed in the space, boots on the ground, delivering what's going on, shifting the narrative from the general poker space to specifically your thing that day. But it just like never really caught on. We did it for PCA. I thought it was like a huge success. I thought that was our proof of concept, and it kind of just fizzled.
That's interesting because I would think that this format does best when it's somewhat closely following any big series. It makes sense to me that would be I don't know. In my mind, that's like the most exciting. Yeah. When you're kind of like, check out this crazy hand. Like, let's talk about this this thing that happened. Like, what do you think? I don't know. I like that kind of stuff personally. But I also am not the best example of the audience because I don't tune into like sports talk shows and stuff like that.
I thought last year had some pretty good legs, but that was because of the bet with Landon and Bex
during the World Series. You're saying, cool, yeah. I think both of you are right. I think. We do always see an uptick during a major series, obviously.
Right. World Series being
being the most.
Yeah.
But I do think both of you are right, and I think again going back to the fact that like I'm not positive that we're best suited for this. I think like the best host for this would be someone in my position that is an MTT player. So somebody who's been in the game for 15, 20 years. But has been an MTT specialist instead of a cash game specialist. And like, then I would make for maybe a better co-host. I think ultimately tournaments are what drive eyes. And the fact that like, that's not my realm. And I have a certain subtle disdain for them as well. Kind of shines through.
Yeah.
So it's like when, McAfee being another great example, for years, they never covered college football. They just refused to. Like, NFL was his thing. Then he got hired by ESPN and got a gig on College Game Day. And now college football is like 35% of what they cover throughout the course of the year. So it's just like, on me a bit to adapt, sure. On me a bit to maybe play and enjoy and bring the experience of MTTs a little bit more, absolutely. But also, like, if we continue this experiment post April 28th or whatever, I think we definitely need to examine like reworking the structure of the show, adding like maybe more of an MTT slant, because like it's tough for Landon to be that guy. He's coming up.
Also, the MMA segment will be really good as
banger.
well.
Absolute banger.
Let's go.
I think it might be worth considering, and maybe I should talk about this off the air, but I think it might be worth considering what is that show called where they. It's like Around the Horn.
Around the Horn's great.
Where they have like 2 minutes or whatever. Yep. I would do longer than 2 minutes for this, but that has two effects. One, people know the subjects that you're covering ahead of time. So and it's not so much that they need to know that they need specific ones to be hit and not go on tangents. It's more that when you see the list of them, you get excited about at least one of those things.
Like a rundown.
Yeah.
Whether it's Around the Horn or PTI, you're still going to get some sort of a rundown.
And then the other part of that is if you had like 5 minutes for each one, it does a few things, but one is we go on a lot of tangents, and that's fine. And that sometimes that makes for
We're on
great
one right
stuff.
now. The show is supposed to end.
Yeah,
Like
sometimes
20
that makes for
minutes ago.
great content or whatever. But I think in general, like we're becoming a lower and lower attention span community. So keeping it to something.
Well, the other aspect was with putting out this much content a week, I thought we would make media's job easier, and that we would have just like a ton of clips.
Yeah,
that were just floating around that we didn't actually have to source ourselves.
It's also hard to
that's
come up with,
yeah.
15 different things to talk about every single day.
Right,
That's
but
why we go on
I think
well, you
Jesse's
can do 10 minutes and just talk about
like 3
6
or
of them.
4.
well, so like to your point, personally, like I like the idea of being a super versatile show rather than just like a cookie cutter one where it's like every day you can expect this.
Yeah,
Because to Brian's point, I don't think there's enough meat on the bone. Right. So it's like, I think that there's room to do one day a week where it's a panel and you do around the horn type, you have like 6 topics. There's a clear rundown and you run through the panel for an hour.
You
right?
can still run with stuff too when you do that. Like it doesn't have to be like, was this hand played well? It can be like, do you guys exploit in this type of spot? Or, that's a bad example because that's kind of boring and nerdy, but you know what I'm saying?
I don't even necessarily think it's a bad example. And I agree with you. Like, I think that a show like this benefits from additional structure. So like if there's one day a week where it's going to be a panel, I think that is fascinating. It's easier to coordinate because you need to get the panel together. You get a list of topics, like that's one day. If there's one day a week where there's an interview style and you bring somebody in like a JRB, I think one of the biggest benefits that we offer is the ability to be messengers from the past. So much of the community has no idea what took place pre-Black Friday. So it's nice to be able to communicate those stories. Like JRB is so fascinating to listen to. He's seen so much within the walls of the high stakes community that people just aren't privy to. So like hearing those stories it's absolute gold. And there are a lot of people like that in the industry. So like allocating time for that on certain days, allocating days for, big news stories as you should when something pops off, having a general strategy day and things like that. The issue becomes when you become too rigid to it. Like we tried to do Strat Chat every single Wednesday for however long, and it was our worst performing episode week over week over week over week. And it's like, okay, well, you've spoken. Thank you. We heard you. We'll move on.
Wait, so they didn't like the hands breakdowns at the end?
No, that's different. That was in the muck.
In the muck, people love.
People loved it in the muck.
I was going to say, I like that part.
It was just a day where it was Strat Chat Wednesday, and we had
we'd have like a bigger conversation, like the one you and I just had.
So you got less views on those Wednesdays.
Yeah. The irony is, if I titled today's episode, for instance, instead of like Airball is back or whatever, Jesse and I have a deep talk about theory, would bomb.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's fair.
But when I go back and watch the analytics for this, the conversation that we have about theory, multi-way, and all this other stuff, I think we'll see high retention during that time. Because people actually do like the
audience
conversation.
Doesn't know what they want.
Well, it's not that. It's that they won't.
No, but it's kind of true. It's just like
that's absolutely. People always say don't look at the comments for adjustments. Look at the analytics.
Right.
There's a reason for that. None of us know what we truly want.
Yeah. Right. They don't want to invest in that conversation enough to click into it.
Right.
But whenever they get casually led into it, they're fascinated by it.
Right. Exactly.
It's like Neil deGrasse Tyson, deGrasse.
No deGrasse Tyson.
Whatever the fuck. I'll never voluntarily watch anything he does. But when he starts to speak, I'm curious.
Yeah.
Right.
He's an interesting dude.
Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of like structural things that work. The biggest letdown, I think, is pulling other people in from the community. I think it's really, 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 really hard. I think a lot of people that you want to hear from have no interest in talking, and that's why you want to hear from them. And then, whatever that next tier down is of people that might be a lot more available, but are far less interesting, they almost don't move the needle enough to warrant all of the hoops that you have to jump through to organize this type of shit. But like we did an MDA panel with Chewy, Nick Howard, and I think there was one other person involved.
MDA?
Mass data analysis.
Oh, we did
I
remember
a debate.
that one, yeah.
Yeah, I basically moderated a debate. It might have just been Chewy and Nick. where I basically just like moderated and they took two sides. It was fascinating and it did well. Like people enjoyed that.
Getting a free ticket to listen to those two interact is just there's you can't put a price on that.
I kept them off the outer space talk for as long as I could.
Those are two S
speaking
tier
of Neil
human
deGrasse
beings
Tyson.
right there.
Absolutely. Okay. By the way, I appreciate that question.
Yeah.
That was very good on the 700th episode of all of them.
We've come a long way since baseball bat innuendos,
That's
Berkey.
right. If you guys just want to fast forward through the first 10 minutes, that'd be great.
That's all the gold. What are you talking about?
All right. That is actually going to do it for us today. Jesse's going to be joining us all week, so you can expect a lot more of these thoughtful, inquisitive insights that he has to offer. Looking forward to it. Lamanna's only with us tomorrow, and then he's heading back to Pittsburgh.
That's right. I'm going to go see those awful Pirates.
Sheer utter disappointment.
Get crushed by the Yankees.
I hope it snows.
It's probably going to rain. It's supposed to rain every single day I'm home.
Yeah, that sounds about right. We'll be back tomorrow, noon Pacific. See you guys all then.
Peace.
Peace.